I was sitting in my office in downtown Chicago at exactly 7:43 p.m. on a Friday night, checking emails from clients. When my phone rang, it was my wife, Sarah, and my mom calling at the same time, and the panic in their voices hit me. Before they even said a word, I could hear it immediately, the shaky breath, the muffled sobs. And then Sarah blurted out, "Honey, we're at the Maple Street Bistro, and all our cards got declined." And my stomach just dropped like I had been punched square in the gut every single year. I had spent scrimping and saving for family nights like this. Every Christmas, every birthday, every little treat suddenly felt like it was evaporating in that exact instant. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was a sense of failure and helplessness, like my entire life of providing for them was being erased in real time. I remember glancing at my desk clock, 7:44 p.m., thinking, okay, I have exactly 15 minutes to fix this before it becomes a public spectacle, before someone at the restaurant calls security, before my mom's face turns red with humiliation, before Sarah bursts into tears in front of the whole place. And you know what the worst part was? I had planned this dinner for over a month. I called the chef at Maple Street Bistro. On August 2nd, specifically requested their signature crab cakes, their truffle risotto, and a bottle of 2015 Chateau Montelena Chardonnay that I had bought myself at auction in 2019 for $218.50. And now here, they were standing by the hostess podium with cards that refused to work, like the universe itself had decided to humiliate me in front of the two most important women in my life. I could hear the clatter of silverware in the background, the low hum of conversation from other tables, and the faint jazz playing from the speakers overhead. I could picture every guest staring at them as they handed over plastic after plastic, and every single one got the same humiliating beat and decline notification. I could hear my mom whispering, "I don't understand, honey," with that quivering voice that still reminded me of when she taught me to ride a bike on Lincoln Avenue in the summer of 1974. And I could feel Sarah's hand shaking against mine over the phone when she said, "It's embarrassing. I don't even know what to do." And that was a moment I knew this wasn't just a car decline. It was a culmination of every unnoticed effort, every 6 a.m. coffee run, every overtime shift. Every year, I worked 2 jobs just to keep our family afloat. Suddenly, it all boiled down to plastic refusing to cooperate in a 5-star restaurant on a Friday night. And I remember yelling into phone, "Hold on, I'm calling the bank. Right now, stay calm, stay there, don't move." And they could hear the urgency in my voice, and I could hear the relief mixed with fear. As they nodded, even though I couldn't see them, I could hear a couple at the next table glancing over like they sensed the tension, the hostess crossing her arms, tapping her foot like she wanted to throw them out right there. And then I thought to myself, this is a defining moment. What you do in the next 15 minutes will either redeem you or haunt you forever. And I wanted to share this with you because if you've ever had your life of effort questioned in a single instant, if you've ever felt helpless while those you love were suffering, you understand what I mean. And so let me ask you, have you ever been humiliated in public because of something completely out of your control? So comment below right now. I want to know your story because what happened next changed everything. And in just a matter of minutes, I was about to discover something about myself and my family that I never imagined, a lesson that would turn a night of shame into a story of empowerment. And the clock was ticking. 7:45 p.m. The restaurant lights flickered slightly as if sensing the drama unfolding in the air, and my hands were trembling as I dialed the bank. I could feel the sweat on my brow, the tightness of my chest, and the ringing of the line filling the silence of my office. And yet amid all the chaos, a strange clarity began to settle, and I realized this was more than just a financial mishap. It was a test of dignity, a chance to rise above embarrassment, a moment where my choices in the next 15 minutes could either destroy or elevate the respect and love of my family. And that is exactly what I did not yet know, the extent of what I was capable of. But what happened in those 15 minutes would prove to be unforgettable, and I promise you by the end of this story, you'll see why in one of the most unexpected nights of my life, the words, "Your card is declined," were the spark that ignited a chain reaction that none of us could have foreseen. So sit tight and stick with me, because the next chapter takes us back to how it all started, the dinners, the saving, the planning, the sacrifices, all leading up to that fateful call that would shake me to my core. And if you think you can relate, share your thoughts below and brace yourself for what comes next, because it only gets more intense from here. I remember that night at the Maple Street Bistro clearly, but to really understand why it shook me in my core, you have to go back decades back to when I was a kid growing up on Elmwood Avenue in Buffalo, New York, a neighborhood where everybody knew your business before you even left the house. And my mom always said, "Wilson, the world doesn't owe you anything but that doesn't mean you don't deserve everything you work for. And those words stuck with me through every scrape, bruise, and triumph I had. My first paper route at age 12 delivering the Buffalo Evening News, starting at 5:30 a.m. in the freezing cold winter mornings where the snow would come up past my knees, and I'd slide on the ice more than once. But I kept going because I knew those $15 a week were more than money. They were my first lesson in responsibility and dedication. And it wasn't just me. My mom worked at the local diner across from Lincoln Park. 16 hours a day cleaning tables, cooking pancakes, and serving coffee to Grumpy. Regular, she made sure my brother and I never felt like we were missing out on anything, even if she skipped meals herself, sometimes just to buy us a comic book or a candy bar. I watched her in awe, learning what selflessness really meant. And my dad, he was gone most of the time working construction in Rochester, which was 2 hours away, driving trucks, lifting beams, sometimes not coming home until midnight. And even though he was absent physically, his calls every Sunday at 6 p.m. with his raspy voice and tired chuckle reassured us he cared. And I learned from those early years that sacrifice was silent work. It wasn't about being thanked or noticed. It was about showing up and doing the right thing. Because it was the right thing to do. Fast forward to 1982 when I was 18. I remember walking into my first job at Midtown Insurance in Buffalo and feeling that strange mix of excitement and anxiety. And the first month I saved exactly $452.37 that I deposited into a tin can under my bed, which I later painted bright red and decorated with stickers of 1980s rock bands like Journey and Blondie that I loved so much. Those stickers reminded me of hope, ambition, and that maybe one day I could provide not just for myself, but for the people I care about most, my mom, my dad, my siblings, and eventually my own family. I didn't know back then that these tiny steps would add up to decades of dedication and financial discipline. Every check I saved, every bill I paid on time, every little compromise I made to live below my means was an invisible thread weaving into the life I was building. And it wasn't glamorous, it wasn't flashy, it was quiet, persistent labor that nobody outside my family really saw. I would take my lunch breaks on Park Avenue, watching the kids play hopscotch or collecting baseball cards, trading them with co-workers, just to feel some sense of normalcy and nostalgia for a simpler time. And even then I had a sense of what it meant to prioritize family over self. It was embedded in me like DNA, and that habit carried forward into adulthood when I married Sarah in 1991. We were both 27 at the time, and we rented a tiny apartment on Lakeshore Drive overlooking the skyline. The rent was $1,224 a month, which we split evenly. And even though money was tight, we always found ways to make birthdays, holidays, and anniversaries special. I remember one Christmas, we spent exactly $312.50 on presents, but every gift was carefully chosen, reflecting years of shared memories and inside jokes. I bought her a vintage record player from 1976 that I found at a local thrift shop for $87.50. And she loved it so much she cried the first time she played a Fleetwood Mac album on it. The smell of vinyl and pine from our tiny tree filled the apartment. And I knew in that moment that this was why I worked so hard all those years, for moments like this, for their happiness, their smiles, their sense of being cherished. And yet, even with all that history, all that careful saving and planning to call from, the restaurant reminded me how fragile it all could feel in a single instant when the world decided to turn against you, or when systems fail unexpectedly. And I could feel myself slipping back to those first teenage mornings on Elmwood Avenue, to the snow hitting my cheeks, to my mom yelling, "Wrap up or you'll catch a cold." And in that same voice, I could hear the echo of my responsibility and my love for these women. And I knew that if I didn't act fast, it wouldn't just be a financial problem. It would become a moral and emotional one. A night of joy turned into a night of humiliation. And so I took a deep breath and reminded myself why I had done all those years of work, why I had saved, why I had sacrificed, why I had lived them. And even in that moment, when they were standing humiliated in the restaurant, I realized that the foundation of my life was not money, it was love and dedication. And that thought steeled me for the next steps in the story, and I promise you wait until you see what happens next, because the sacrifices, the memories, the long nights, and early mornings are all leading to the moment when all of it comes to a head. And if you were moved by the lengths we go for family, think about your own sacrifices, and keep that in mind as we move forward in the next chapter. The story only gets more intense. And if you're thinking, what would I do in that situation, comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. As I sat at my desk that night, phone still pressed in my ear, hearing Sarah and my mom struggling at the Maple Street Bistro, I couldn't help but flash back to every single dollar I had painstakingly saved over the last 30 years, because understanding the context made the humiliation sting even more sharply. I remember in 1995, I had just closed a small real estate deal in downtown Buffalo, and for the $32,487.56 profit I decided to put aside exactly $12,000 for family emergencies, just in case. Fun that nobody ever knew about, but that I meticulously tracked in a leather ledger with tiny handwritten notes next to each deposit and withdrawal. I remember the smell of that ledger, its slightly musty pages, and the sound of the fountain pen scratching as I documented each transaction. It became my quiet obsession to make sure that any time Sarah wanted a night out or my mom needed something unexpected, we'd never feel the pinch, because I had been saving and sacrificing for decades. And even before that, when I started my first business consulting firm in 2003 in Chicago, I remember investing $21,763.84 in office equipment, computers, chairs, and software to create a small professional space that my clients would feel respected walking to the front door. And that money was stretched down a penny because I had 4 kids to support rent, to pay, and still manage to honor every Christmas, every birthday, every family vacation, meticulously planned. In 2006, I surprised Sarah and my mom with a weekend at the Grand Geneva Resort in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, booking 2 rooms with spa packages, a champagne brunch, and a private jazz dinner on Friday night. The total bill came to $2,417.32, and I remember every detail: the plush velvet chairs at the restaurant, the subtle scent of lavender from the spa robes, the gentle clinking of champagne glasses as my mom smiled and said, "Wilson, you think of everything." And that was exactly what I had worked for decades to ensure. The comfort and happiness of those I love. The thing is, even with all these decades of effort, the signs of disrespect had started creeping gradually, and I had been dismissing them because they seemed so small at first. I remember in 2012 when I had transferred $7,500 to cover my mom's emergency car repair. She thanked me with a tight smile, but I noticed her eyes flicker toward my sister-in-law, who muttered something under her breath about always having Wilson cover everything, and I just shrugged it off, thinking she didn't mean anything. And in 2015, when I bought the limited edition Fleetwood Mac box set for Sarah, costing $412.99, I noticed a waiter at a restaurant glance at our table and comment with a smirk to a colleague, "Those people must be loaded." And Sarah laughed nervously, not knowing how to respond, and I forced myself to laugh too. But inside, I felt the tension building, little reminders that not everyone appreciated our sacrifices, little cracks forming in a system I had worked so hard to maintain. And then the night of the bistro call hit like a thunderclap. I could feel all those years of meticulous saving, planning, and sacrifice flashing before my eyes, and suddenly it wasn't just a card being declined, it was a symbol of how fragile respect and dignity can be. In an instant, the anticipation of embarrassment for my mom and Sarah mingled with decades of effort, and it was intoxicating and suffocating at the same time. I could almost hear the echoes of my younger self counting coins in that tin can on Elmwood Avenue, the crisp sound of a $1 bill sliding through my fingers, the winter wind stinging my face, and those tiny moments of pride and responsibility all converging into this single moment in 2025. And in that moment, I realized how much I had invested in their happiness, both emotionally and financially, and how the system or society or whatever cosmic alignment had decided to test me by creating this scenario. I could feel my pulse race and the phone vibrating in my hand as I tried to calm my mom. "Just breathe, it'll be okay." And Sarah whispering, "I don't know if I can face them." And I knew I had to do more than just reassure them. I had to act to protect the dignity of my family. And in that instant, I remembered another memory from 1978, when my dad had been wrongly accused of missing funds at the construction site, and how he had calmly documented every transaction, every work log, until he proved his innocence. And I thought to myself, if my dad could do that at 28, I could surely handle a financial hiccup at 52. So I began to map out exactly what steps I would take within the next 10 minutes to turn the humiliation into resolution. I also recalled moments of sacrifice that were so specific they grounded me, like the $3,412.11 I had given my youngest daughter for her first apartment deposit in 2009. Or the $2,750 I had spent on Sarah's 50th birthday party at the Drake Hotel in Chicago with her friends and co-workers, remembering the smell of roses, the taste of chocolate truffles, and the laughter of every guest echoing to the grand ballroom. And I realized that all of it, every penny, every plan, every quiet act of devotion, had been preparing me for this moment of crisis and potential vindication. I was on the edge of feeling completely defeated, yet a strange sense of anticipation began to rise, knowing that this wasn't just about money. It was about protecting their dignity and demonstrating the lifetime of care I had invested. And you know what happens when you realize that after decades of giving quietly, you are finally being tested. How you respond defines not only the night, but your legacy. And so I wanted to pause for a moment and consider what lengths you have gone for your loved ones, and imagine the pressure of having that all called into question in one single instant. And I promise you the next chapter will show exactly how the first humiliation begins to unfold, and you'll see why the stakes were higher than I could have ever imagined. And as you read or listen, think about this. What would you have done in that moment? Comment below. Let me know, because the story only grows from here, and it's about to get even more intense as I take you through the escalation of humiliation that would push me and my family to the edge. When I finally managed to get through to my bank at 7:47 p.m., I could still hear my mom and Sarah standing at the hostess podium at the Maple Street Bistro. I imagined the fluorescent lighting casting harsh shadows. Across their faces, a hostess tapping her foot impatiently, and a few diners turning their heads in curiosity and subtle judgment, my mom whispering, "Wilson, I don't know what's happening," with that vulnerable tone that reminded me of the first time she had taught me to bake cookies in our tiny Elmwood Avenue kitchen in 1973, and Sarah biting her lip nervously, holding her handbag close to her chest. I told the bank representative, "Please check for any holds or declines. My account number is 4,532,1987, 9876, 1234 now, please. I need this fixed immediately." And while I was speaking, I could hear a sharp click from the speakerphone, and then the tiniest hint of laughter from someone at the next table. I could picture the man adjusting his glasses and whispering to his date, "Looks like they're having trouble paying." And I felt a familiar sinking feeling deep in my gut. I could feel the blood rushing in my ears like a warning alarm. Every second felt like a minute, and every passing moment was humiliation stretching out like an endless tape reel from the back of my mind. I remember how I had always tried to shield my family from embarrassment from a young age. I remember the time in 1984 when I had lent my cousin exactly $327.45 for her car repair, and she had tried to pay me back in pennies and dimes at the neighborhood block party, and I had discreetly counted them into my hand in silence so nobody would see. And now here I was decades later, powerless, as my own family faced something so public and demeaning. I could hear my mom exclaim softly, "Why is this happening to us?" And Sarah muttering, "I don't know how to explain this." And I could almost hear the hostess muttering under her breath, "Sir, you're going to have to leave if you don't pay soon." And that's when the first bystander appeared, a woman in her mid-60s holding a martini glass with her pearls slightly askew, leaned over and said, "Are you okay? Do you need help?" I could hear my mom respond shakily, "Yes, thank you, but it's just a banking error." And I could picture Sarah glancing around nervously, noticing a man at the bar recording on his phone. And I felt that familiar surge of indignation rise in my chest. It wasn't just embarrassment anymore. It was public humiliation and injustice. And I remembered vividly how, as a child in Buffalo, I felt that same pang when the kids on the corner called my dad cheap because he fixed a neighbor's fence without taking payment. And now my mom and wife were being silently judged while their cards were rejected in real time. And I knew that I couldn't just wait for the system to fix itself. I had to intervene immediately and decisively. I could hear the bank representative mumbling into the line, "Yes, sir, there's a temporary hold on your account due to unusual activity." And I felt a strange mixture of relief and frustration, the relief that the problem could be fixed, the frustration that our dignity was already compromised. I imagined the clatter of silverware and the quiet whispers from other tables. A hostess now folded her arms and frowning, as if trying to signal that patience was running out. And I could see Sarah crossing her arms, gripping her bag tighter, her eyes darting toward the door for an escape route. While my mom's hands trembled slightly over the podium, I reminded the bank again, "Please remove the hold now. I need this resolved immediately." And as I spoke, I could hear the familiar beeping sound from the restaurant's card terminal in my imagination, the same sound that had haunted my mind since that first call, beep decline, beep decline. And I pictured Sarah leaning closer to my mom, whispering, "Maybe we should just leave." And my mom shaking her head, whispering, "No, we can't leave like this." And the tension was suffocating. Even through the phone, I could almost hear my own heartbeat pounding like a drum, and the cold air of the restaurant contrasting with the warmth of the crowded room. The subtle scent of garlic from the bistro's kitchen mingling with the faint perfume of diners passing by. I could picture the waitress passing near the table, eyeing them with thinly veiled judgment, and then the first audible gasp from a nearby diner as my mom handed her card over again, and it kept declining. I could almost hear Sarah muttering under her breath, "This is mortifying." And I felt the fire of indignation grow stronger, knowing I had invested decades of effort, love, and money, only to see it unravel in front of strangers. And then the first real voice of arrogance entered the scene. The hostess said in a sharp tone, "Sir, we really need payment now, or you'll have to leave." And I could hear the weight of every eye on them, the tension rising, the humiliation palpable. And that's when I knew this wasn't just about cards. This was about standing up against the creeping arrogance and public shaming and injustice of a system that had put my family in this position. And I told the bank, "Please expedite this now. I don't care what it takes. Just remove the hold." And my mom whispered, "Wilson, you sound so angry." And I responded quietly but firmly, "I'm angry because this shouldn't be happening to us. It's not fair." And I could feel that statement hanging in the air like a band of resolve. And I want you to think about that moment. Imagine being powerless. As someone judges your loved ones in public, imagine their faces and the slow burn of humiliation it generates. And I promise you in the next chapter you will see how the humiliation escalates even further with more witnesses, more arrogance, and more public embarrassment as we push closer to the breaking point. And as you read, ask yourself, what would you do if your parents or spouse were standing there unable to defend themselves? Comment below and let me know, because the story is only about to get even more intense. By 7:53 p.m., the Maple Street Bistro had transformed from a warm, cozy Friday night dinner spot into a stage for what felt like public judgment. I could hear every beep of the card terminal in my imagination. Beep decline, echoing like a cruel metronome, marking the unraveling of decades of effort and love. My mom's hand shook visibly as she held the American Express she had used for over 25 years, and Sarah's face had gone pale with humiliation. The hostess had now crossed her, arms fully leaning slightly on the podium with a tight-lipped frown that said without words, "I don't care how long your husband has been saving, you still have to leave if you can't pay." And at that moment, a young couple at the table next to them whispered audibly, "Why don't they just pay it already?" And my heart sank deeper because I knew that no matter how many sacrifices I had made, my family's dignity was being shredded in front of strangers. And I remembered exactly the $3,500 I had saved over 3 months in 2020 to cover a surprise weekend getaway to Napa Valley for Sarah and my mom, the wine tastings, the candlelit dinners, the plush queen beds in the Meadowood Hotel suite. It was all carefully planned with months of budgeting, yet all that effort fell invisible now as my family faced the judgment of strangers' attention kept building. And then the apex hit with the arrival of an older man in a navy blazer, standing behind them holding a phone, recording the moment. I could almost hear him whisper, "This is gold for social media." And I could picture the glow of his phone screen reflecting in my mom's terrified eyes, Sarah gripping her handbag tighter, murmuring, "Wilson, I can't believe this." And my mom whispering, "I never imagined this would happen." And I could feel a surge of protective anger wash over me, every bead of sweat on my forehead, every muscle in my jaw tightening, as I imagined storming into the restaurant myself and confronting everyone. I could see the neon exit signs flickering, the soft clinking of cutlery on plates. And yet amid all this, I could hear the bank representative mumbling, "Sir, there's a limit being flagged due to unusual spending." And I felt that same mix of frustration and urgency rise like a tidal wave. I remembered vividly the years of small sacrifices that built this life, the $2,175 I had spent in 2007 on my mother's 60th birthday party at the Drake Hotel and Night, with roses scattered across the table, champagne flowing, and jazz music that made her eyes sparkle, and the $418 I had given Sarah for her first 1978 vintage record collection I bought on eBay and carefully stored in my climate-controlled basement. Now, all that care felt threatened by a simple technicality and public judgment, as I imagined the hostess whispering to another staff member, "I've had enough of this." And the beeping terminal echoing again and again. I realized this was no longer just about money or a card. Hold, this was about public humiliation escalating in real time. And I could hear the whispers from other tables growing louder. "What's taking so long? Are they broke or what? This is awkward. And every word felt like a punch to the gut. My mom was now holding back tears, her fingers tightening around the podium, Sarah pacing slightly back and forth, whispering to her, "Please, Wilson, fix this." And in that moment, I felt decades of frustration and small injustices rise within me every time I had been ignored, dismissed, or underestimated over the years from childhood to adulthood, from $327 car repairs to $12,000 emergency funds meticulously saved and hidden in my ledger now. Manifesting as an urgent need to protect my family and their dignity, I could see the hostess now muttering, "Sir, you need to pay or leave now," loud enough for other diners to hear, and the smirks forming on their faces like a slow burn of injustice. And then the ultimate humiliation struck a woman from another table who leaned over and whispered to her friend, "I can't believe they can't even pay for dinner." And Sarah's eyes widened with shame, my mom's lips pressed tightly together, and I knew in that moment that our life of careful planning and sacrifices had been publicly disregarded, and I felt an intense, almost cinematic moment of clarity rising in me as I realized that I could not let this continue. I could not allow decades of love, effort, and protection to be swept away in a single evening, and every second I waited felt like a countdown to total humiliation. I could see the man filming now trying to get closer to capture their reactions, the hostess tapping her foot with. Increasing impatience, the whispers spreading across the room, and the low hum of jazz music now felt like a cruel contrast of the tension. And I remembered vividly my father dealing with false accusations at his construction site in 1978, how he had calmly collected evidence and reclaimed his dignity. And I realized in that instant I had to emulate that calm power and strategic thinking, every muscle in my body, ready to shift from desperation to control and protect the ones I loved. And that's when the first spark of resolve ignited inside me, the simmering anger coalescing into clear purpose. I could feel my breath steady, my hands gripping the phone tighter, dialing with focus the beeps from the terminal becoming a background rhythm as I prepared to take action that would not only end the humiliation, but reclaim dignity and command respect. I could feel the weight of the entire room on my family's shoulders, but I also sensed that moment when inertia breaks and a person decides no longer to accept injustice. And I whispered into the phone to the bank representative, "Do whatever it takes to fix this now." And the clock read 7:55 p.m., and I knew the next 2 minutes would determine everything for us. And I want you to imagine being at that breaking point, every whisper, every smirk, every judgmental glance building crescendo, and ask yourself, what would you do in that moment? Comment below, because what comes next will shift the balance entirely, and the story is about to pivot from unbearable humiliation to a turning point of clarity and action. At exactly 7:56 p.m., with the phone pressed in my ear and the beeping terminal still echoing in my imagination, something shifted inside me, a clarity so sharp it cut to the haze of panic and embarrassment. I could feel my chest rise and fall differently, my posture straightened, as if decades of quiet dedication and sacrifice were aligning in that single moment. And I realized that this wasn't just a financial glitch, it was an opportunity, a test of patience, strategy, and the hidden resources I had cultivated over a lifetime. I could hear my mom whispering softly, "Wilson, I don't know what's happening anymore," and Sarah murmuring, "I can't take this." And I felt a surge of protective instinct, like a switch had been flipped in my brain. Every instinct I had honed from childhood in Buffalo, from delivering newspapers in minus 10-degree winters to watching my father reclaim his reputation in construction. Disputes resurfaced. I remember the exact moment when, at age 18, I had negotiated my first client contract in Midtown Insurance for $7,324.50. And the way I had felt a mix of fear and exhilaration mastering my composure, I realized that the same skill, patience, and hidden knowledge could be applied here. And I felt my hands stop trembling just slightly as a plan started forming, every heartbeat syncing with purpose, every second a countdown to reclaim control. I imagined the restaurant around them fading into the background, the whispers, the smirks, the beeping, the hostess's impatience, all becoming peripheral as I focused on the solution. I could see my mom's hand still shaking on the podium, her knuckles white. Sarah pacing softly, murmuring, "Do something, Wilson, please." And I felt that calm authority wash over me like a cool breeze, a whisper of power that had always been beneath the surface. I remember my emergency fund ledger, exactly how every deposit and withdrawal had been tracked over 30 years, the $12,000 fund from 1995, the $21,763.84 invested in my Chicago office, the dollar $3,500 set aside for Napa Valley 2020. The $2,175 for my mother's 60th birthday, and suddenly all of it became tangible proof of the life I had built on my diligence and responsibility, and the realization hit me that I had underestimated my own ability to assert control, to right an injustice not with brute force, but with precise, calculated action. I could hear the bank representative on the line saying, "Sir, we can lift the hold if we verify the last 3 transactions." And I felt that small spark of leverage in my hands, a proof of decades of careful planning becoming a tool of empowerment. I felt my breathing steady my eyes, narrowing my vision, as if filtering out everything irrelevant. Only the goal remained: restore dignity, protect my family, resolve the crisis. And then the first signs of subtle power began to show. I didn't raise my voice or shout. I simply stated clearly, check transactions 43-210987 6,543-2109, 5,432-1098 7654, 3210, 9,876-5432-1098 7654. This will resolve the issue immediately. And I could sense the bank employee pausing on the other end, impressed or maybe intimidated by my calm authority. And I could almost hear my mom sensing the shift. "Wilson, something changed," she whispered tentatively, and I told her, "Just stay there. Trust me." And I could feel Sarah's breathing slow slightly, and I could imagine a wave of realization washing over the bystanders in the restaurant. The man filming freezing mid-recording, the hostess glancing up as if noticing a subtle shift in energy, diners leaning forward subconsciously sensing something different in the room. And in that instant, I remembered a lesson from my childhood. When my father calmly organized documentation to reclaim his reputation, I realized the same principle applied here. Composure, preparation, and strategic use of hidden resources were the key to turning humiliation into empowerment. I could almost hear the jazz in the background fading into silence as time slowed down. The ambient murmurs of the restaurant dimming in my mind. I focused entirely on the phone, the bank, the sequence of transactions, and the safety of my family. I could feel a smile creeping into my mind, even if not on my face, the kind of smile that comes with quiet confidence, not arrogance, the sense that the storm's about to break in your favor, and all the decades of work, sacrifice, and love are finally about to pay off in a moment of justice and validation. I whispered again, not angrily, not loudly, but firmly, "Do it now, this is urgent." And I could feel the tension in my own chest ease slightly, as if the universe itself was beginning to align the final steps of resolution. And I want you to pause here and consider the moment when clarity hits after chaos, when power you never realized you had rises to meet the injustice before you think about your own hidden reserves and resources. And imagine how you would respond in a similar moment, and keep that thought, because the next chapter consolidates this awakening into a deliberate, calculated decision, a decision that will change everything. And as you read, think to yourself, what would you do in that situation? Comment below, because the story is about to shift from awakening to decisive action. And you're going to see exactly how decades of hidden preparation start to pay off in ways that nobody in that restaurant could have predicted. At 7:58 p.m., I could feel it. The moment where hesitation ends and deliberate action begins. The point where decades of patience and careful planning converge into a single, decisive choice. I could hear Sarah pacing softly behind the podium, whispering, "Wilson, please make it stop." And my mom gripping the edge of the table with her knuckles white and trembling slightly. I took a deep breath and reminded myself that this was no longer about panic or embarrassment. It was about asserting control and protecting their dignity. I remembered every painstaking step I had taken over the last 35 years, the $12,000 emergency fund, meticulously tracked in my leather ledger, the $32,487.56 profit from my first real estate deal, the $2,417.32 grand Geneva weekend plan with precise attention to every detail, every transaction, every note, every cent stored like armor for moments exactly like this. And in that moment, I realized it wasn't just money. It was power, the quiet kind that comes from foresight, preparation, and experience. I whispered firmly into the phone, "Listen carefully. I'm going to read the 3 transactions you need to verify: 4,321.0987, 6,543.2109, 5,432.1098, 7654, 3210, 9,876.5432.1098, 7654. Confirm them immediately. And I could sense the employee on the other line pausing, sensing the authority in my voice of presence that commanded attention not through volume, but through certainty. I could feel Sarah's gaze on me, hesitant at first, then slowly steadying, a glimmer of hope replacing her fear, and my mom, ever perceptive, sensing the shift, whispered softly, "Something changed, you sound different." And I could feel the tension in my chest tighten, and then release simultaneously as I focused entirely on executing the resolution. I remembered vividly my father in 1978 standing calmly among construction workers, falsely accusing him of missing funds, and how he had methodically collected every piece of evidence to reclaim his name. I realized the principle applied here: composure, documentation, decisive communication. And I could feel my own pulse steadying, the hot embarrassment of the restaurant fading into peripheral noise, the whispering diners, the hostess's impatient tapping. Even the man recording freezing in mid-motion. I could feel that quiet shift of energy in the air, a subtle but unmistakable ripple that happens when someone who's underestimated finally takes control. I recall the dozens of times I had quietly endured small injustices in life, the whispers from co-workers, neighbors, strangers, assuming I would always be the one to give and the one to absorb humiliation silently. And I realized none of that mattered now. Because I had prepared for this, I had the resources, the knowledge, and the composure to act, and I made the first true strategic move. I didn't yell or demand. I didn't threaten or intimidate. I acted with calculated calm, speaking clearly and slowly. Now lift the hold immediately. Verify the transactions I provided. My family's dignity depends on it. And the words themselves seemed to carry weight across space and time, carrying decades of meticulous preparation into a single moment. The bank employee hesitated and then confirmed, "Sir, yes, the transactions check out. Hold will be removed within 2 minutes." And I felt a small but significant rush of triumph, knowing the storm was beginning to break in our favor. I looked at Sarah, saw her shoulders relax just slightly, the fear in her eyes softening, and my mom exhaling quietly with relief, and I could feel the first subtle power signals ripple through the restaurant. A man filming lowered his phone slightly. The hostess's arms uncrossed for a fraction of a second, diners exchanging puzzled glances, as if sensing the momentum had shifted. And in that instant, I realized that true power was quiet, methodical, and derived from foresight and preparation. It wasn't loud or brash. It was the culmination of a life lived strategically and with care. Every small act, every saved dollar, every meticulous note had led to this pivotal moment. I reminded myself that this wasn't just about money or even dignity. It was about proving that a lifetime of preparation, love, and resilience could withstand a moment of public humiliation. And I made a conscious decision. I would not allow this to escalate further. I would assert control, protect my family, and restore justice in real time. I could feel the room subtly shift in anticipation, a calm before the storm, the energy changing imperceptibly yet unmistakably, and I whispered to myself, "It ends now. Calm, precise, no mistakes." And I knew that this deliberate choice was a catalyst for the reassertion of authority, the reclaiming of dignity, and the beginning of the reversal of humiliation. I wanted to pause and think about that moment when you decide not to accept injustice, when you choose deliberate action over panic. Imagine that feeling, the awareness of power you didn't realize you had, and keep that in mind, because in the next chapter, the first signs of the plot twist begin to emerge, the subtle revelation of hidden power that will completely change the dynamics in the room. And as you read, ask yourself, what would you do if every second of hesitation could cost your family their dignity? Comment below and share your thoughts, because the turning point is about to fully manifest. At 8 p.m., with my palms no longer trembling and my mind razor sharp, I sense a shift in the air, subtle yet undeniable, like the calm before a storm. The moment when quiet power begins to reveal itself. I could hear Sarah muttering softly to my mom, "Wilson, something's changing," and my mom clutching her purse a little less tightly, her breath slowing. Sensing the transformation that was quietly taking place in the room, I looked around the Maple Street bistro through the lens of acute awareness, noticing every smirk, every whisper, every gaze, and I realized the first spark of authority I was about to exert was already being registered by the people around us. The hostess, who had moments ago been rigid and impatient, now paused, tilting her head slightly as if reconsidering her stance. The man filming with his phone lowered to chest height, his curiosity now mixed with hesitation. And I could almost feel the momentum in the room subtly pivoting in our favor. I spoke calmly into the phone again, not shouting but deliberate, precise. each word measured and commanding. Confirm the last 3 transactions exactly as I dictated. Hold to be removed immediately. This is urgent. And I could hear the subtle pause of the bank employee, a brief silence that carried more weight than any outburst, followed by the soft acknowledgement. Yes, sir. Everything is in order. Hold will be removed within 1 minute. And in that moment, I could feel the tide turning the invisible thread of authority I had nurtured for decades, through strategic saving, meticulous planning, and unwavering commitment, was beginning to assert itself in real time. I recalled the exact sums I had prepared for emergencies: the $12,000 fund from 1995, the $32,487.56 profit from my first Buffalo deal, the $2,417.32 Napa weekend, the $418 vintage record collection for Sarah in 2005, each dollar like a silent weapon of power, each plan a proof of capability and foresight. And as the whole was being lifted, I watched the reactions unfold. The man with the phone raised his eyebrows. The hostess unconsciously straightened her posture. Diners exchanged confused whispers, sensing something extraordinary but unable to articulate it. And my mom's eyes widened with the quiet awe of recognition that her son had transformed panic into control. And Sarah exhaled, her shoulders dropping, a flicker of pride and relief replacing the fear and embarrassment. I could sense in the air a subtle ripple of influence spreading across the restaurant. And I thought about my father in 1978 calmly assembling evidence to reclaim his reputation in the construction business, and I realized that same principle applied here. Composure, meticulous preparation, and strategic timing were invisible weapons, unnoticed until activated in the right moment. And I could feel a hum of anticipation rise in me, that sharp clarity that tells you the reversal has begun, and the first tremors of power are being noticed by the antagonist, the hostess, now caught off guard by the calm authority radiating from my voice, muttered under her breath, "Well, he's handling it." And I could imagine her mind racing, trying to reassess the situation, while man filming shifted awkwardly, sensing that the footage he had anticipated might no longer portray humiliation, but something entirely different. And as I focused on my mom and Sarah, ensuring their dignity remained intact, I could feel the subtle beginnings of empowerment radiating from me to them, a quiet confidence, a reassurance that this ordeal would be resolved not with chaos, but with strategic, controlled action. And I began to notice small signs of respect emerge in the way the hostess kept a polite distance, the subtle nod from a nearby diner, even the murmured acknowledgement from the bartender that yes, this was no longer an ordinary situation. It was becoming a testament to deliberate preparation and hidden power. I whispered gently to my mom, "Stay calm. We're almost there." And Sarah glanced at me, her eyes reflecting something I hadn't seen before, a mixture of relief, trust, and admiration. And I could feel my pulse slowing, the adrenaline now transformed into focused energy. And I knew this was just the beginning, the first small victory of many to come. The whole would be removed. But more importantly, the perception of who held power in that room was shifting. I remembered every sacrifice, every dollar, every painstaking plan, every moment I had silently endured and protected my family. And I realized all of it had prepared me for this exact instant, to turn the humiliation into empowerment and to begin reclaiming dignity in real time. I could sense the subtle awe of witnesses. The man recording now hesitant, the hostess cautious, the diners curious. And I understood that the initial revelation of power was complete. The first crack and facade of arrogance had been struck, and I whispered softly to myself, "It begins now." And as you imagine this, think about the moment when preparation meets opportunity, when quiet power rises to correct injustice, and consider how it feels to shift the tide of a humiliating moment into a scene of authority and control. If this moment resonates with you, share this story with someone who needs to see that dignity can be reclaimed even in public crisis, because a full revelation is only a moment away, and the story is about to escalate further, showing not just subtle power, but complete, undeniable control over the situation. By 8:02 p.m., the room at Maple Street Bistro had transformed from a stage of embarrassment into a theater of controlled power. I could feel it. The subtle shift I had initiated a moment ago now amplifying into undeniable authority. The bank hold was officially lifted. The terminal now accepted my mom's car with a green approval light, glowing brightly. And in that moment, the reaction from everyone around us confirmed what I had long suspected. Perception could be as powerful as reality. I could see the hostess' jaw drop slightly, her rigid posture relaxing as if the weight of authority she had wielded a moment ago had quietly shifted to me. The man with the phone froze mid-recording, his fingers hovering over the screen, unsure whether to continue capturing what had started as humiliation or now as seen as strategic empowerment. Diners whispered audibly, their curiosity and awe mixing with disbelief. Did they just fix it? I can't believe that card went through, and my mom and Sarah exhaled together, relief washing over them like a warm breeze. After a long storm, I could feel the full force of decades of preparation. Every emergency fund meticulously tracked, every ledger note, every strategic decision, every careful plan, all culminating in this instant. And I realized that power is often invisible until activated, and then it becomes absolute. I glanced down at my phone, and the confirmation email pinged through $0.00 pending. All transactions cleared, and I could see Sarah whispering to my mom, "He did it. He really did it." And my mom nodded, her lips quivering with pride and relief, a tear escaping despite herself, and I could feel my pulse steady, a calm energy radiating through my body. My mind focused on the next step, maintaining dignity, reclaiming authority, ensuring the lesson was unmistakable yet respectful. I remembered every instance I had been underestimated. From my first client meeting in Chicago in 1987, negotiating $7,324.50 without hesitation, to saving $3,500 over 3 months in 2020 for the Napa weekend. Each moment, a hidden thread woven into the fabric of strategic power that I could now deploy when the stakes were highest, and I began to observe the full reactions around us. The hostess, now cautious, muttered, "Well, that's impressive," to herself. The man filming lowered his phone entirely, finally realizing that the story he intended to capture had flipped in narrative. The diner's eyes followed every movement, sensing that control and composure can dramatically shift circumstances in real time. I could hear Sarah whispering, "I can't believe it. Wilson, you turned this around." And my mom adding softly, "You've always been capable, but tonight you prove it in front of everyone." And in that moment, the combination of relief, pride, and empowerment surged through me, and I realized a full plot twist was complete. The humiliation had been not just halted but reversed, and the perception of power had shifted decisively. I could feel the subtle tension from the hostess, who had moments ago projected impatience and authority, now replaced with caution and a touch of respect. The man with the phone muttered under his breath, "I didn't expect that," and even the diners murmured, acknowledging the quiet authority I had displayed, and I could sense a larger principle manifesting. Preparation, patience, and strategic action are more formidable than public judgment, arrogance, or even momentary authority. I watched as Sarah and my mom sat down finally, their bodies relaxing, their dignity fully restored, their smiles tentative but real, the small tremor of anxiety replaced by admiration and relief, and I could feel the narrative in the restaurant shift. The whispers were no longer about judgment. They were about respect, the subtle recognition that someone who had been underestimated for decades had quietly, methodically, and flawlessly reclaimed control. And in that instant, I realized that this was the essence of empowerment. Not humiliation, not confrontation, not shouting, but strategic action in the right moment with full composure and complete clarity. I could hear Sarah saying softly, "Wilson, they don't even know what hit them," and my mom adding with proud glint, "You've changed the story for everyone here." And I felt the invisible thread of decades of meticulous effort finally manifest into a visible, undeniable force. The hold lifted, the cards cleared, the witnesses transformed, the public humiliation replaced with quiet respect and acknowledgement. And I knew then that true authority is quiet yet absolute. And I whispered to myself, this is how decades of preparation finally pay off. And I want you to imagine that moment, the public witnessing a reversal of fortune, the subtle awe of bystanders realizing that dignity and respect can be reclaimed, that humiliation is not permanent, that composure and strategy win over chaos. If this story resonates with you, share it, because the full transformation is a testament to how preparation, patience, and quiet power can overcome injustice. And as the next chapter unfolds, you'll see the immediate consequences and justice ripple through in real time. By 8:05 p.m., the hold on my mom's and Sarah's cards had been lifted, the green approval lights glowing like small beacons of victory, and the room at Maple Street Bistro shifted palpably. Every whisper, every glance, Every posture registering change. I could see the hostess straightening fully now, her previously rigid arms uncrossed, a subtle apology in her posture, and I could hear her mutter under her breath, "I didn't realize," while the man with the phone froze, realizing that the moment he had anticipated as viral humiliation had turned into a demonstration of strategic composure and authority. Diners murmured, their eyes following us as we approached the table to settle the bill. But this time the whispers were different. He handled it. "That's impressive." "I can't believe how calmly he turned around." And I could feel a sense of justice unfolding in real time, every detail of our lives that had been meticulously planned. The $12,000 emergency fund from 1995, the $32,487.56. Profit from my first Buffalo deal, the $2,417.32 Napa weekend, the $3,500 saved over 3 months in 2020, the $418 vintage record collection. Each became tangible proof of capability, proof that public humiliation cannot stand against preparation and composure. And as I reached the table, I noticed the hostess approaching cautiously, trying to regain control but sensing the shift in authority. She said softly, "The terminal, everything's approved," and I simply nodded, my gaze calm, deliberate, exuding quiet confidence that left no room for argument. I could see the man with the phone now hesitating, unsure if he should continue filming, and I realized the moment had fully pivoted. The public witnesses were now aligned with me, the diners, bystanders, even some staff, recognizing that we were no longer the subject of humiliation, but the orchestrators of justice. I could hear Sarah exhaling softly, whispering, "It's finally over." You turn around, and my mom, clutching her purse a little more loosely, adding, "I can't believe the power of calm and preparation," and I could feel the satisfaction of decades of careful planning, small sacrifices, and meticulous strategy crystallizing into immediate, tangible results. The waitress approached, tried to make conversation, and I could see the subtle respect in her tone. "Sir, everything's sorted." I apologized for the inconvenience, and I nodded again, acknowledging her words without anger because the humiliation had already transformed into validation. The man filming finally lowered his phone entirely, muttering, "I didn't expect that," and I could feel the room collectively exhaling, the tension shifting into admiration and respect. I glanced at Sarah and my mom, the relief and pride on their faces almost palpable, and I knew that justice wasn't just in the car approvals. It was in the acknowledgement from everyone present, the witnesses who had observed the shift from powerlessness to authority. I could feel the first wave of the antagonist's realization. The hostess, initially rigid, now sensing that her impatience and arrogance had been met with measured, undeniable control, and in real time. The subtle consequences were unfolding. The man with the phone backing away, realizing the footage he anticipated would no longer humiliate, but document empowerment. The diners nodding, subtly, some whispering compliments, others marveling at the strategic calm that had changed the entire dynamic, and I could sense that my calm composure, combined with decades of preparation, had not only resolved the immediate issue, but had publicly reasserted our dignity. I remembered vividly the countless small injustices I had endured, the whispers of doubt from neighbors, colleagues underestimating me, small humiliations at every stage of life. But in that moment, each instance had contributed to my ability to act decisively, and now, the first tangible consequences were emerging. The hostess, who had moment ago wielded temporary authority, now publicly acknowledging her misjudgment. The man filming hesitant, unsure whether to edit the narrative or leave it raw. The diners now subtly supporting us through their attention, recognition, and silent respect, and I could feel the energy shifting, a quiet sense of empowerment spreading from me to Sarah, to my mom, to the witnesses around us. And in that instant, I realized that justice could manifest not only through punitive measures, but through the transformation perception and the alignment of bystanders with truth, dignity, and composure. I whispered to my mom softly, "It's okay now." We reclaimed control, and Sarah, finally sitting down, exhaled, "You didn't just fix it, you commanded respect." And I could feel the subtle power radiating in the room as every participant, hostess, diners, staff, acknowledged a reversal in authority, the restoration of dignity, and the subtle public humiliation of arrogance as justice began its ripple. And I want you to imagine that feeling, the instant when the scales tip, when public perception aligns with truth, when your strategic action restores not just outcome but respect. And notice how the witnesses, even silent observers, amplify the justice in real time. And if this moment resonates, share it with someone who needs to see how composure, preparation, and courage can turn humiliation into empowerment, because the story is only halfway complete, and the next chapter will show the full impact and culmination of immediate consequences, the ripple of justice, and the complete transformation of power. By 8:10 p.m., the room at Maple Street Bistro had fully shifted. The initial tension evaporated and replaced by a quiet but unmistakable recognition of authority and competence. I could feel it radiating through the air, every whisper, every glance, every posture confirming the reversal of humiliation and the assertion of dignity, the cards approved, the hold lifted, and the terminal displaying $0 pending. The very symbols of public embarrassment now transformed into tangible proof of preparation, composure, and strategic action. I could see the hostess, once rigid and authoritative, now moving with caution, her previous impatience replaced by hesitant respect and subtle gestures of acknowledgement. "I apologize again, sir," she murmured, her voice softer than before, and I nodded calmly, absorbing the recognition without arrogance. Knowing that her acknowledgement of error was the first layer of justice manifesting in public, I glanced at the man filming, who now lowered his phone completely, a small nod of acknowledgement, as if realizing the narrative he had sought to capture from mockery had flipped entirely in the diners, their murmurs growing into quiet exclamations of admiration. Whispered among themselves, "He handled that perfectly. Never seen anyone turn around so calmly." Respect, finally, and I felt the collective energy of the witnesses, their attention and subtle support reinforcing the impact of what had occurred. A small crowd of bystanders, previously passive observers, now leaning in, intrigued and aligned with the outcome, recognizing that the temporary arrogance and impatience of the hostess had been countered with calm authority, strategic foresight, and undeniable competence. And I could feel Sarah's eyes on me, wide and reflecting relief and pride, and my mom's lips quivering into a smile. The tension of the evening melting into awe as dignity and control reasserted themselves in real time, every detail of our preparation. The dollar, $12,000 emergency fund from 1995, the $32,487.56 Buffalo deal profit, the $2,417.32 Napa weekend, the $3,500 saved in 2020, the meticulous record keeping, the hidden strategic planning, culminated now in full manifestation of immediate consequences and complete reversal of humiliation. The hostess subtly shifted, her hands clasped nervously in front of her, realizing that her prior impatience and microaggressions had been met with calm but decisive power. I could see the ripple effect in the diner's behavior, small nods, whisper acknowledgement, even subtle clapping from the corner of the room as respect quietly but undeniably consolidated in favor of my family. And I could feel the antagonist's embarrassment, the hostess's once unquestioned authority, evaporating as public perception aligned with truth, dignity, and competence. Every subtle gesture, every glance, every murmur amplifying the justice being served in real time. I could see Sarah whispering to my mom, "He didn't just fix it. He completely turned the tables," and my mom nodding, eyes misting with relief and pride. And I could feel the room, the atmosphere, even the air itself acknowledging complete transformation of authority. The man with the phone now slowly backing away, unsure whether to record further, realizing that any footage would reflect empowerment rather than humiliation. And I could feel the weight of decades of preparation, patience, and strategic planning solidifying into this single, visible outcome. The green terminal lights, the clear approvals, the witnesses' recognition, and the subtle but unmistakable humbling of the antagonistic hostess, all combining to create an environment where justice was not just served, but celebrated quietly, without chaos, without shouting, purely through composure and careful, deliberate action. And I could see Sarah exhaling softly, whispering, "The entire room is on our side now," and my mom's proud smile broadening as if decades of quiet diligence had finally manifested in a tangible, undeniable victory. The ripple of justice extended beyond the immediate transaction. Diners, staff, and bystanders now subtly aligned with us. The recognition that calm authority, preparation, and dignity could overcome public humiliation now etched into the room's atmosphere. I felt a sense of completeness as the immediate consequences played out, the antagonistic behavior neutralized, public support manifest, and dignity restored. Every bystander, every witness, every participant quietly acknowledging the reversal of fortune, and I whispered softly to myself, "This is what happens when preparation meets opportunity." And I want you to imagine that sensation, the moment when public injustice is not only corrected but reversed, when humiliation transforms into empowerment and recognition, when every observer becomes an ally in acknowledging the rightful outcome. And share this story with someone who needs to understand the power of strategic action, composure, and preparation, because the next chapter will bring the final transformation and reflection, consolidating the lesson, showing lasting impact, and delivering the ultimate call to action. As the evening at Maple Street Bistro came to a quiet close around 8:20 p.m., the soft of a conversation replaced the tension that had gripped the room. Just minutes earlier, I watched Sarah and my mom sit back in their chairs, the relief on their faces mingling with pride, the tight knot of anxiety finally untwisting into calm satisfaction. I could feel a deep sense of accomplishment settling into my chest. Decades of meticulous preparation, careful saving, and quiet strategic planning had not only prevented a personal embarrassment, but had transformed the public narrative in our favor. Every detail mattered. The $12,000 emergency fund I had started in 1995, the $32,487.56 profit from my first Buffalo real estate deal, the $2,417.32 Napa Valley weekend meticulously saved over months, the $3,500 tucked away in 2020 for unforeseen emergencies, all small acts that now collectively created a shield of empowerment and confidence. I remembered vividly the lessons learned in childhood, watching my father navigate challenges with calm determination and methodical strategy, from negotiating contract in Chicago to organizing records for court disputes. Each moment of quiet endurance had been training for times exactly like this, and as I reflected, I realized that the true victory wasn't just a lift of financial hold. It was a reclamation of dignity, the restoration of respect, and the demonstration of composure in the face of humiliation. I could see the reactions of those around us. The hostess, now respectful and cautious, silently acknowledging her error. The diners quietly admiring the calm authority that had turned potential disaster into a demonstration of strategic power. Even the man with the phone, lowering his device and recognizing the narrative had shifted entirely in our favor. And I felt a profound connection to every observer, as if the room collectively understood that preparation, patience, and strategic action are more powerful than public ridicule or temporary arrogance. I whispered softly to Sarah, "It's not just about fixing the cards. It's about how you respond when everything is against you." And she nodded, her eyes reflecting understanding and admiration, while my mom, ever perceptive, added softly, "You've turned every small act of preparation into a tangible shield for us." And I realized that this transformation extended beyond the immediate crisis. It was about empowering ourselves, protecting our family, and reclaiming control in any situation where we had previously felt powerless. I could feel a sense of permanent change, not just for us, but for everyone who had witnessed the event. A subtle, unspoken understanding that dignity can be restored through calm, deliberate action, and that public humiliation is only temporary when met with composure and preparedness. I thought about the countless moments of life where small sacrifices, quiet discipline, and strategic thinking had been dismissed or underestimated, and how, in this single evening, every seemingly minor effort had manifested into undeniable power and authority. I want you to imagine your own life, the small acts of preparation, the quiet decisions, the patience and resilience you built over decades. How might they serve you when a moment demands action? The lesson here is universal. Dignity, respect, and authority are cultivated quietly, but manifest decisively in moment of crisis. And I could feel a warm sense of pride and accomplishment washing over me. A quiet joy that comes not from revenge, but from empowerment, from reclaiming what is rightfully yours in a manner that commands respect rather than fear. I whispered softly to my mom, "We're okay now. Everything is back in our hands." And she smiled, tears glistening, while Sarah leaned forward. "You didn't just save us. You taught us the power of preparation." And I could feel the weight of decades of invisible work finally acknowledged, validated, and celebrated in real time. And now, I want you, the viewer, to reflect on your own moments of potential injustice, your own crises of humiliation, and consider how composure, preparation, and strategic action can completely transform outcomes. How you respond in those moments defines your dignity and your authority, and sharing the story can. Inspire others to recognize that empowerment is cultivated quietly but displayed decisively. So here's what I want you to do: connect emotionally. Think about your own experiences with public embarrassment or injustice and how you could have acted differently. Engage with us. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Share your personal stories, grow your power. Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you never miss lessons on reclaiming authority and dignity. Connect with the community. Share this story with friends or family who need to see that patience, preparation, and calm action can turn any public humiliation into empowerment. And finally, remember this: decades of quiet discipline, every small sacrifice, and every careful plan can manifest when you need it most. Dignity is reclaimable, authority is reclaimable, respect is reclaimable, and the story that unfolded tonight at Maple Street Bistro is proof that no matter the humiliation, no matter the injustice, strategic calm and preparation can turn the tide. And as you reflect on this, remember this phrase: your power is invisible until you choose to show it. And when you do, nothing can undo it.